What if we told you that Andy's dad and even Sid may no longer be alive? Andy's dad. Andy, Woody's former owner, lived with his mother and younger sister. However, his father never appeared, and that has led a lot of people to believe that he passed away before the first movie even began. After all, his dad is never even mentioned, almost as if it were a forbidden subject in the house. Now, here's something interesting. In the first movie, the family is actually in the middle of moving, and Andy's mom is shown taking care of both kids without any mention of their father. That led to the theory that he may have passed away before the story began. The move could have happened because they needed to buy a cheaper house, since Mrs. Davis had to start supporting the family on her own. Some people believe Andy was given Buzz Lightyear specifically to help him cope with the grief of losing his father. In that case, Andy may have spent the first Toy Story ignoring Woody, not just because he now preferred Buzz, but because the cowboy reminded him of the time when his father was still alive. Pretty sad, right? But this is only the first of 11 Toy Story characters who died.
That's right, another Cinewave is coming for you to enjoy.
Sid. Sid traumatized a lot of kids with his modified toys. What few people know is that he seemingly appeared as a ghost in a certain Pixar movie, which practically confirms that he is no longer alive. His last appearance in the franchise was in Toy Story 3, where he was already older and working as a garbage man. But that wasn't his last appearance in a Pixar movie. In Coco, we see a music competition between ghosts. Just look at this skeleton with long hair and zoom in on his shirt. It has a skull symbol on it, making it identical to the shirt Sid wears. And before you say it's just a coincidence, Sid kept wearing that shirt even after becoming an adult, as we saw in Toy Story 3. Not to mention that Sid clearly loved music, since he was listening to music and dancing during his cameo in Toy Story. So it makes perfect sense to see him taking part in a music competition. Apparently, music distracts him even while he's doing other things. Could he have gotten into an accident while listening to some heavy rock music and ended up becoming a ghost? Yes, it's definitely possible that the skeleton in Coco is someone else, but that would be one huge coincidence, and we know very well that very few things are ever just coincidences in Pixar. Emily. Another character who has a pretty good chance of being dead is Jesse's former owner, Emily, and for one very simple reason. Emily was a child many years ago, around the mid-1960s. In fact, she was going to appear in Toy Story 5 as an elderly woman. However, that scene was cut for some reason. One possible reason for this is that Pixar's artists may have found the idea that Emily is no longer alive more interesting. Nobody says this out loud in the movie, but there is one strong piece of evidence supporting the theory. Another family is now living in her old house. Now pay attention, this doesn't confirm that Emily died. She could have simply moved away, but since she would already be an elderly woman many years after abandoning Jesse, there is a possibility that she may no longer be alive by the current point in the franchise. That fits perfectly with the message the entire Toy Story franchise has always carried. Time passes, people change, and nothing ever stays the same forever. It's sad to think that Jesse may never see Emily again. Wheezy. Emily isn't the only one who simply disappeared as time went by. Among Andy's own toys, there's an even stranger case. Wheezy. Everything seems to indicate that he may no longer be alive either. In the second movie, the penguin was already a toy that had been pushed aside, but things got even worse for the poor guy, because he disappeared from the franchise starting with Toy Story 3. In that movie, he only appeared in a flashback. Just look at him there, mixed in with the other toys without any kind of spotlight. In that movie, Woody mentions that Wheezy and several other toys were donated or sold, which means we may never see him again. There's another reason why we'll probably never see him again. Wheezy's voice actor, Joe Ranft, passed away in 2005 in a car accident. Pixar has a tradition of not replacing voice actors who have passed away. When a tragedy like that happens, that actor's character usually disappears or, at most, shows up without speaking. It's a kind of tribute meant to show that nobody is replaceable. So, with that in mind, we can be pretty sure that Wheezy will never appear in the franchise again. It's actually possible that he may have even died off screen after being donated. Will we ever get an answer about what happened to the penguin and where he is today? If you also think it's a shame that these characters may never appear in Toy Story again, comment #sad down below. Bo Peep. Woody's girlfriend is another character who, at least for a long time, seemed like she would never return, until Toy Story 4 finally revealed the truth. Just like Wheezy, Bo Peep disappeared after Toy Story 2, with the explanation that she had been donated or sold sometime between the second and third movies, where she only appeared in a flashback. Just look at her way over there in the corner! Of course, a lot of theories started popping up after that, with people believing that Bo Peep had actually fallen off a shelf and shattered, since she can break very easily because she's made of porcelain. Fortunately, Bo Peep returned in Toy Story 4 and proved that she was still alive. That's when we found out that, after being donated, Woody's girlfriend ended up in an antique store, but eventually left and started living a life full of adventures as a lost toy without an owner who helps other toys that have been lost or abandoned. Combat Carl. One of the first deaths in Toy Story is Combat Carl's, because it happened in the very first movie when he was blown up right in front of everyone, and Sid was the one responsible for it. But that raises a question. Did Combat Carl really die? Since he's a toy, maybe the explosion only left him badly damaged, right? Well, that could be true, but that specific Combat Carl was never seen again anywhere in the franchise. Other Combat Carl toys have appeared throughout the series, with a new one even showing up in Toy Story 5, but the one Sid blew up never showed any sign of life again, and that pretty much speaks for itself. Who would have thought the first movie would have one of the most brutal tragedies in the entire saga? Buster. It's not just the toys and humans who suffer tragedies in Toy Story. Buster, Andy's dog, also passed away. He was introduced in the first Toy Story when Andy was only 6 years old, and he stayed in the franchise all the way through Toy Story 3. However, by then, he definitely wasn't the same energetic Buster we used to know. Since the third movie takes place several years later, and Andy is already 17 years old, Buster is much older and more tired with gray fur. That was the last time we saw him, but 2 more movies were released after that. Toy Story 5 takes place around 4 years after the events of the third movie, since Bonnie was 4 years old in Toy Story 3 and is 8 in the latest movie. And let's be honest, the last time we saw Buster, he didn't exactly look like he could make it another 4 years. Unfortunately, it's unlikely that he would still be alive today. However, Buster wasn't the only pet to suffer an unfortunate fate in Toy Story. Sammy. In Toy Story 5, we learn about a little animal that died without ever even appearing. Sammy, Bonnie's pet lizard. The one who appears instead is Sammy 2, his replacement. And the toys know very well that it isn't the same lizard. But did you know that even Sammy 2 died? That's right, this isn't actually shown in the movie itself. The credits are what reveal this secret, because a completely different lizard from Sammy appears, and above him we see the name Sammy 3. So yes, Bonnie's second lizard died after the events of Toy Story 5 and was replaced by a new one. How much do you want to bet that in Toy Story 6 we're going to meet Sammy 4? It's kinda sad, but the movie itself treats it like a dark joke. Subscribing is quick, easy, and keeps you updated with everything happening here. Let's go? Chuckles. Some characters' fates are hidden even in the credits, like Sammy's. Others are even stranger because the character simply disappears without any explanation, and that's exactly what happened with Chuckles. The clown simply vanished without warning. He was pretty important in Toy Story 3 since he was the one who told Woody about Lotso because he had been friends with the bear in the past. However, Chuckles doesn't show up in Toy Story 4 or in the 5th movie, and the strange thing is that the clown was among Bonnie's toys at the end of Toy Story 3, which seemed to indicate that he would become part of Woody's group from then on. The problem is that, just like Wheezy, he was removed from the franchise for a real-life reason. His voice actor Bud Lucky passed away in 2018, 1 year before Toy Story 4 was released. So Pixar's tradition of retiring characters whose voice actors have passed away came into play, and Chuckles simply disappeared. The strange part is that this time, there wasn't even an explanation within the story. Wheezy was donated or sold, while Chuckles simply isn't at Bonnie's house anymore, and nobody ever talks about it. Stinky Pete. The villain from Toy Story 2, Stinky Pete, suffered one of the cruelest fates a toy could possibly have, and then vanished without a trace, almost as if he weren't even alive anymore, and maybe he really isn't. But what exactly was his cruel fate? At the end of Toy Story 2, Pete was taken by a little girl who loves ruining her toys, kind of like Sid. He realized this when he saw that the girl's Barbie had her entire face covered in marker. That was Stinky Pete's worst nightmare, since his goal had always been to remain perfectly preserved forever in a museum. The villain was never seen again after that well-deserved ending, but we can be pretty sure that nothing good happened to him afterward. In the best case scenario, Pete is still at that messy girl's house today, covered in paint and glitter. But realistically, the little girl may have let him get chewed up by a dog or thrown him in the trash. Those are only examples, but they're very possible ones. The most disturbing part? He didn't even have the saddest fate in Toy Story, because that title goes to the next character, Lotso. Toy Story 3 definitely didn't hold back when it it came to making Lotso pay for his crimes, because the villain is living through a complete nightmare, assuming he's even still alive. The teddy bear who terrorized Sunnyside Daycare was turned into a garbage truck decoration, forced to swallow flies for the rest of his life. That was how Lotso left the franchise, because he was never seen again, and his situation is much worse than Stinky Pete's. After all, Lotso can't even move. He's going to stay stuck in the same place until he completely falls apart from the rain and dirt. In fact, there's a pretty good chance that he was destroyed sometime after the events of the movie. Since Lotso was attached to a garbage truck, once the garbage collector got tired of him, the next step would probably be tossing the teddy bear into the landfill incinerator. Ironic, considering Woody's group almost got incinerated and Lotso didn't try to save them. It's possible that the bear spent a few years stuck on the truck before eventually being completely incinerated. We know he was pretty evil, but when you look at things this way, it almost makes you feel sorry for him. Before you go, take a look at the 2 videos on the screen. Thanks for watching, and see you next time!